And we're picking back up on Chapter 6 of Burying the Boys, the CIA, the Mob, and America's Secret History by Daniel Hopsicker. Who are the boys? We asked Russell Welch, the criminal investigator for the Arkansas State Police, who kept pestering his superiors to do something about the massive criminal activity taking place under his nose at Mina. Would it have made any difference to his investigation if he had known Barry Seal was working for American intelligence? It was concern. I was concerned about the Mina airport, he told us calmly. That was my sole focus when journalists come up here to Mina and start poking too far into who Seal knew. They end up going off the deep end. We can appreciate the sentiment probing into Seal's connections in the world of clandestine services leads into a bewildering fog-shrouded swamp teeming with gangsters, armed dealers, corrupt politicians, spooks, and military intel types who collectively, or so the theory goes, make up the secret government. What Undersecretary of State Elliot Abrams called the Iran-Contra hearings the shadow government. It is this group, this organization that has no fame, that we know of anyways, that we prefer to call simply the boys. We thought at first the Bay of Pigs would be the ideal place to wade into their activities. Every member of the Watergate break-in, for instance, was also part of the Bay of Pigs investigation. And at least one of them, the infamous Frank Sturgis, not only knew Oswald, but had also sat at a nightclub table with Barry Seal in Mexico City in January of 1963. But there is an even earlier event that served as a blueprint for the Bay of Pigs, and which brought many of our major characters together for the first time. Just as Americans were settling down to watch the first episode of Captain Kangaroo in flickery black and white, the boys were taking an introductory bow in history at the CIA-staged Guatemala coup in 1954. It was an out-of-town tryout for many of the stunts they will later pull stateside. In his autobiography, Howard Hunt recalls that he recommended the ouster of Guatemalan President Jacob Arbenz shortly after he was elected, but that his superiors at the CIA refused to act until Arbenz threatened the profits of United Fruit. Then, however, things very quickly shifted into high gear. Alan Dulles selected Richard Bissell as a special assistant and apprentice, as Bissell described it, and he immediately went to work on the coup plan. Bissell will run the Bay of Pigs op. Dulles will get a seat on United Fruit's board. The CIA chain of command in Ardben's operation included Bissell, Deputy Director Frank Wisner, Tracy Barnes, and Colonel J.C. King. And somewhere in there is Nelson Rockefeller, whose Latin American interests seemed endangered by Arbenz. He joined the Eisenhower administration as something called an assistant for Cold War strategy. Starting the ball rolling was David Atlee Phillips, a spook born on Halloween, who set up a clandestine radio station in Mexico called The Voice of Liberation, which pretended to be broadcasting from within Guatemala. He orchestrated a crescendo of false reports about legions of rebels which didn't exist, and major battles which never took place. Phillips termed the technique the Big Lie. Later, he'll head the Mexico City CIA station near the time of the Kennedy assassination, and E. Howard Hunt later anointed the propaganda chief of the CIA's anti-Castro operations, and later spotted as one of the three tramps in Dallas on November 22, 1963, was an officer who worked brilliantly on the Guatemala project, according to one pipe-smoking CIA man. The New Orleans contingent included Guy Bannister, key liaison man for U.S. government-sponsored anti-communist activities in Latin America through the Anti-Communism League of the Caribbean, used by the CIA to help engineer the overthrow of the leftist Arbenz regime in Guatemala. Bannister, a key player, had his hand in lots of pies. When Seal was busted with C4 plastic explosive, local officials figure two of the principals, Barry Seal and New York mobster Murray Kessler, met each other through their common association with Bannister. From Miami came Johnny Roselli and Claire Booth Luce's great friend, CIA agent William Polly, using a CIA front called the Pacific Corporation, an offshoot of Flying Tigers Airlines. Polly later fronts for the CIA's anti-Castro activities. Henry Luce's wife will fund anti-Castro Cubans whom the House Committee on Assassination suspected of involvement in the JFK assassination. Also from Miami came pilot Donald Edward Browder, associated with Jack Ruby in arms smuggling into Cuba as early as 1952. Another soldier of fortune type busy in the Caribbean since he stole a cache of machine guns from an army base in Augusta, Georgia, and was indicted for unlawfully exporting P-38 airplane exporting a P-38 airplane to Havana way back in 1947. The home team contingent from Alexandria, Virginia included Samuel Cummings, president of the CIA's Inner Arms, one of whose first deals is supplying M1 rifles bought in Britain for the coup in Guatemala. In the following decades of dictators, business will boom and Cummings will sell arms to Haiti's Francois Duvalier, the Dominican Republic's Rafael Leonidas Trujillo, and Cuba's Fulgencio Batista. When Batista fled Cuba before a shipment of Cummings Armalites arrived, the resourceful CIA armorer flew immediately in the Guatemalan armed forces and caused elements to turn against Arbenz. The psychological warfare was directed by Howard Hunt and David Atlee Phillips, a newcomer to the CIA, who, when first approached about the assignment, protested to his boss, Tracy Barnes, but Arbenz became president in a free election. What right do we have to help someone topple his government and throw him out of office? For a moment, Philip wrote later, I detected in his face a flicker of concern, a doubt, the reactions of a sensitive man. But Barnes quickly recovered and repeated the party line about the Soviets establishing an easily expandable beachhead in Central America. Arbenz finally received an ultimatum from army officers: resign or they would come to an agreement with their invaders. His back to the wall, he tried to arm civilian supporters to fight, but officers blocked the disbursement of weapons, and the Guatemalan president knew the end was at hand. The CIA intervention in Guatemala stirred up a great deal of ill will toward the United States and Latin America, amid complaints about a Yankee double standard that used the free world rhetoric against communism but ignored the transgressions of right-wing tyrants. Life magazine blandly noted these protests, observing that world communism was efficiently using the Guatemalan show to strike a blow at the United States. Following the success of the Guatemalan coup d'etat, its veterans moved on to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. Another result was to install Carlos Marcello as a major criminal presence in the country by 1957, according to Professor Peter Dale Scott in Deep Politics and the Death of JFK. Gambling in the capital became the province of one of Meyer Lansky's associates, and John Martino and Johnny Roselli, two major mob figures in accounts of CIA mafia plots to kill Kennedy, began to pass through regularly. This is how it came to pass that the educated, urbane men of the State Department, the CIA, and United Fruit decided that literate peasants of Guatemala did not deserve the land which had been given to them. The pipe-smoking, comfortable men of Princeton, Harvard, and Wall Street decreed that workers did not need their unions, and that hunger and torture was a small price to pay for being rid of the scourge of communism. Ambassador John Porfiry went before a congressional committee and told them, "My role in Guatemala prior to the revolution was strictly that of a diplomatic observer, but no one, according to the book Deadly Secrets, had told his wife, Betty Jane, who in the days after the coup penned some commemorative verse about her hubby. Sing a song of Quetzals, pockets full of peace. The junta's in the palace, they've taken out a lease. The commies are in hiding, just across the street. To the embassy of Mexico, they beat a quick retreat, and pistol-packing Porfiry looks mighty optimistic, for the land of Guatemala is no longer communistic." The new rulers celebrated the liberation of Guatemala by arresting thousands on suspicion of communist activity, many of whom were tortured or killed, and by passing a law which disenfranchised 3/4 of Guatemala's voters, as many as 150,000 people would be killed in violence that would continue with hardly a pause of 40 years. It is in the sidelights of the Guatemala affair that the outlines of the secret history to come can be seen in a rough draft form. The Carlos Castillo government, post-coup for example, got almost $1 billion in aid from the United States, but was judged inept by the CIA, which was described as being dismayed. So in July of 1957, new President Castillo was shot and killed just as his wife sat down to dinner at the presidential palace. But Porfiry, or Betty Purifoy, by then no longer around, having moved on with her pistol-packing hubby to bring light and grace to the people of Laos, might have written, "It does not pay the CIA to dismay." One last sidelight, Castillo's killer was identified as an unlucky young man who was also very possibly clinically depressed, because according to the first authorities to arrive on the scene after the shooting, who were probably, as luck would have it, all military men, right after killing the president, the depressive assassin committed suicide with the very same rifle he used in the assassination. The Guatemalan government described the hapless assassin, Romeo Vasquez Sanchez, as a communist fanatic who had been expelled from the Guatemalan army 6 months earlier for communist ideology, but who had then slippery communistic fellow that he was, wormed his way into the presidential palace guard, and they claimed to have found a 40-page handwritten diary of the assassins in which he supposedly wrote, "I have had the opportunity to study Russian communism and have a diabolic plan to put an end to the existence of the man who holds power. Since the first lone nuts, several subsequent generations of lone nut assassins have emulated this trailblazer, keeping diaries of their own. Propaganda specialist Howard Hunt, there when this trend began, no doubt has had himself a smirk or two behind his pipe smoke when recalling how terribly clever it has all been. The boys had set up shop in Guatemala. And that's it for today's chapter.